Vivian, I am taking another wife." The words dropped from Ken's mouth as if they were nothing. No warning, no pause, just a statement that sliced through the evening air. Vivian froze, the spoon in her hand trembling above her plate. She searched his face, waiting for the smirk that would reveal it was a joke. But there was none. His eyes were steady, his jaw firm. Her lips quivered. "Ken, why would you say such a thing? Am I not your wife? Have I not given you 2 strong boys? Do we lack anything in this house?" "One woman is no longer enough for me," he said flatly, sipping his drink as if her question deserved no further answer. The room went silent except for the distant laughter of their sons in the next room. Vivian's chest tightened, her breath catching as if the walls were closing in. This was the man she had loved, the man she had prayed with, cooked for, and supported through every storm. Yet here he was, speaking of replacing her as though she were nothing. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She clenched her fists under the table, willing herself to stay strong. She had known Ken long enough to understand one thing: when his mind was made up, nothing could move it. She whispered, her voice breaking, "So this is what I am worth to you? Just a shadow you can push aside." Ken stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Prepare yourself, Vivian. This is not up for debate." The door slammed behind him, leaving Vivian alone at the table. The stew had gone cold, but her heart burned with silent pain. The next morning, Ken's voice echoed through the small living room as if nothing had happened. He stood tall, adjusting his shirt, his tone sharp and final. "The introduction will be this weekend. Make yourself ready to welcome my new wife." Vivian gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. Her heart pounded, but her face showed no emotion. She had cried in the night until her pillow was wet, but in the daylight, she refused to shed another tear. She went about her chores quietly. She washed the children's clothes, cooked their food, and swept the compound as though life had not just been turned upside down. Her 2 boys, Adrian and Cyprian, played with sticks and laughed, too young to understand the storm gathering inside their mother. At night, when the house grew silent, Vivian lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her husband's words replayed in her mind like a drumbeat. "Prepare yourself. Prepare yourself." She whispered into the darkness, "Is this my worth? To be replaced so easily?" Outside, the city buzzed with gossip. Neighbors congratulated Ken as he strolled through the streets, shaking hands and smiling proudly. Some clapped him on the back, praising his strength as a man. Ken basked in their approval, never once thinking of the woman who carried his home in silence. Vivian walked among them like a shadow. Some women pitied her, others mocked her, whispering that she had failed to hold her husband. But she never answered. Her silence was not weakness. It was her shield. Deep inside, a seed of resolve began to grow. She would not fight, she would not beg. But she knew, something had to change. Life in Vivian's home became a theater. Every day, she played her role as if nothing was wrong. She served Ken his meals with steady hands, even though her heart trembled inside her chest. She smiled politely when visitors came, though every smile cost her strength. Relatives and friends now filled the compound more often, but their visits were not for her. They came to discuss Ken's wedding. Laughter rang out, glasses clinked, and words like celebration and new beginning floated through the air. Some looked at Vivian with pity, others with mockery. She heard the whispers, she could not hold her husband. But she kept her face calm, her voice steady. Adrian and Cyprian were too young to understand. They only saw their mother cooking, cleaning, and tucking them into bed. But they noticed how tightly she held them at night, how long her kisses lingered on their foreheads. Ken was blind to it all. He strutted about the city, spreading invitations, buying drinks, and boasting of his new wife. In his eyes, he was a king celebrating his conquest. In Vivian's eyes, he was a stranger she no longer recognized. Each night, when the compound grew quiet, Vivian sat by the window in the moonlight. She thought of the years she had given him, her youth, her loyalty, her prayers, her strength. And now, he was casting her aside like an old cloth. But with every tear she held back, something else rose within her. Her silence was no longer just pain, it was a shield, and behind it, she was gathering strength. She whispered to herself, "My children will not grow up watching their mother live in shame. Something must change." That night, after the noise of the compound had died down and Ken was out late celebrating again, Vivian sat quietly in the children's room. Adrian and Cyprian were asleep, their small chests rising and falling peacefully. She watched them closely, her heart tightening as she brushed their hair gently with her fingers. Her tears finally spilled, silent and hot. She whispered, "My sons will not grow up in this cage. They will not watch their mother treated like dust." For years, Vivian had believed in endurance. She had listened when elders said, "A woman must be patient. A wife must swallow her pain." She had swallowed until her heart was full of wounds. But now, her spirit refused to bend any further. She rose from the bed and walked to the window. The moon poured its light over her face, as if heaven itself was listening. She took a deep breath, and in that breath came clarity. She would not fight the new wife. She would not scream or curse. She would not beg for the love that had already left her home. Her path was clear, she would leave. Not in shame, not in anger, but with her dignity intact. She would take her boys and begin again, even if it meant starting from nothing. That night, Vivian's silence became her strength. Her pain became her decision. She no longer thought of herself as powerless. She was a mother, and a mother's courage is greater than any man's pride. She wiped her face, kissed her sons again, and whispered, "Soon we will be free." From that moment, Vivian was no longer just a wife abandoned. She was a woman preparing for freedom. As Ken moved proudly about the city, announcing his wedding and handing out invitations, Vivian moved quietly inside her home, making her own plans. He thought she was weak. He thought her silence meant agreement. But while he was preparing for his celebration, she was preparing for her escape. Every night, when the house grew still, Vivian opened her small wooden box and carefully folded the boys' clothes into it. She tucked away school documents, birth certificates, and the little savings she had managed to gather over the years. She hid it all under the bed, covered neatly so no one would suspect. By day, she played her role. She smiled faintly when neighbors greeted her. She cooked Ken's meals without complaint. She even answered when visitors asked about the wedding, nodding politely while her heart hardened within her. The children noticed little things. Their mother hugged them tighter at night, kissed them longer before school, and whispered, "You are my strength," when they lay in her arms. They did not understand, but they felt the weight of her love. Sometimes, Vivian's hands trembled when she folded the boys' uniforms. Sometimes she paused, asking herself if she was truly ready to leave everything behind. But each time, she reminded herself of the truth: respect had died in her marriage, and where there is no respect, love cannot survive. She began to rehearse the day in her mind. The moment Ken would be busy celebrating his new bride, she would walk out of the house with her sons. No fighting, no noise, no shame. Just a quiet departure. She whispered to herself, "The same day he will welcome her, I will say goodbye." The city woke up buzzing with excitement. Drums echoed from the street corners, cars honked in long lines, and music floated through the air. People dressed in bright lace and flowing gowns hurried to witness Ken's grand wedding. The air was thick with laughter, gossip, and celebration. Ken stood proudly in the middle of it all, dressed in gold embroidery that shimmered under the sun. His new bride, Gift, smiled beside him, her wrists heavy with bangles, her hair tied high in an elaborate gelly. Guests clapped and cheered as they danced together, their union praised as a day of joy. But far away from the noise, in the quiet of their small home, Vivian was moving differently. Her bag was packed neatly, resting by the door. Adrian and Cyprian stood close to her, holding her hands tightly. Their eyes, wide with confusion, searched her face for answers, but Vivian only gave them a calm smile. She moved slowly through the house one last time, touching the walls she had once decorated, the chairs where she had once sat laughing with Ken, the bed where she had once prayed for their marriage to last. Then, without a tear, she placed the house key carefully on the window ledge. She lifted her bag, held her son's hands firmly, and stepped outside. The street was quiet in her neighborhood, almost as if the world itself was giving her a path to leave. With each step she took, her heart grew lighter. By the time Ken lifted his bride on the dance floor, his chest full of pride and his pockets empty from waste, Vivian was already gone, walking into a future she was ready to build on her own. Late into the night, after hours of dancing, drinking, and boasting, Ken returned home. His friends had clapped him on the back, praising him for his strength and wealth. His laughter had filled the wedding hall, but now the streets were quiet. He staggered into the compound, humming, expecting to be welcomed with food and noise. Instead, he stepped into silence. "Vivian," he called, his voice echoing through the rooms. No answer. He moved quickly, opening doors, checking the kitchen, the children's room. But everywhere he looked, emptiness stared back. The beds were stripped bare. The boys' small shoes were gone. The walls, once alive with family, felt hollow. His heart began to pound. His chest tightened as his eyes darted around in disbelief. He rushed outside and pulled out his phone with trembling hands. He dialed her number. When she answered, her voice was calm, steady, and cold. "Where are you? Why would you do this?" he demanded, his voice shaking. Vivian breathed in deeply before speaking. "I only took what belongs to me, myself and my children." The words cut through him like a blade. He staggered, gripping the wall to steady himself. For the first time, his pride crumbled. His voice cracked as he tried to speak again, but the silence on the other end was stronger than his noise. His knees grew weak, his hands covered his face, and the reality of his loss crushed him. The home he thought he controlled was gone, and the wife he thought would endure forever had walked away quietly. That was the moment Ken finally broke. Ken called again, his voice no longer proud but trembling with fear. "Vivian, please, come back. I have nothing left." His words tumbled out in panic. "I spent everything on this wedding, every kobo, every saving. I thought you were fine because you didn't fight me. I thought your silence meant you agreed. Why didn't you stop me, Vivian? Why didn't you say something?" Vivian held the phone to her ear, listening to his desperation. Her lips pressed tightly together, her silence carrying more weight than any argument. She had spoken before, he had simply chosen not to hear. But then his next words fell like a stone into her chest. "She's pregnant," he confessed, his voice cracking. "Gift is pregnant. I had no choice. I had to marry her. Please, you have to understand." Vivian froze. Her breath caught in her throat, her hand shaking as she gripped the phone. Pregnant. Now, the truth stood bare before her. This was never about tradition or culture. It was not about Ken suddenly deciding he needed another wife. It was betrayal, covered with a wedding garment. Her heart felt heavy, but her mind grew clear. The pieces fit together now, the sudden announcement, his urgency, the wasteful spending. He had not been building a new life, he had been hiding his unfaithfulness. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and exhaled slowly. "Pregnant?" she repeated softly, almost to herself. In that single word was all the pain, the shock, and the clarity she needed. No more illusions, no more questions. The man she had trusted had broken the very foundation of their home. That was the moment Vivian saw everything clearly. Vivian gripped the phone tighter as his voice cracked on the other end. Ken's sobs filled the silence between them, heavy and desperate. For years, she had known him as proud, strong, untouchable. Now, he was reduced to a broken man begging for comfort. "You thought my silence meant I agreed with you?" Vivian's voice was steady, though her chest trembled. "You never once asked what I felt. You never thought of our sons, Adrian and Cyprian, who deserve a father that honors their mother." Ken's breathing grew ragged. He tried to speak, but his words came out choked with tears. "All those years," she continued, her voice firm, "I stood beside you. Through hardship, through hunger, through long nights when we had nothing. I carried your burdens, your children, your name with dignity. And this is what you gave me in return." "Vivian," he whispered, his voice breaking, but she did not allow herself to soften. "You betrayed not only me, Ken. You betrayed the vows we made, the home we built, the trust our sons placed in you. And for what? For a lie dressed as love? For pride that now lies shattered at your feet. His silence was deafening. Only his quiet sobs remained. Once, she would have pitied him. Once, she would have rushed to ease his pain. But that Vivian no longer existed. I carried your shame in silence, but I will not carry your guilt, she said finally. Then she ended the call. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of his power lift from her shoulders. The phone call ended, and Vivian sat still for a long while. The room was quiet except for the soft breathing of her sons, asleep on the mat beside her. She watched them closely, the innocence in their faces, the peace they carried even in the middle of brokenness. They were the reason she had endured for so long, and now, they were the reason she walked away. She rose quietly, folding the last of their clothes into a small bag. Her life had been reduced to this, a bundle of essentials, a few savings, and the unshakable will to survive. Yet, in that simplicity there was freedom. As dawn broke, she opened the door and let the morning air brush against her skin. For the first time in years, she felt no weight on her chest. She wasn't running away in fear, she was stepping forward with dignity. Vivian stirred awake, rubbing his eyes. "Mama, where are we going?" "To a new beginning," she whispered, smiling softly as she brushed his hair back. Cyprian stretched and clung to her hand, and together they stepped into the light of the rising sun. Far across the city, Ken lay slumped in his bed, surrounded by his choices, his pride now dust. The new bride by his side could not fill the emptiness Vivian's absence left behind. Vivian never looked back. She knew her silence had spoken louder than any scream, her departure had carried more power than any fight. The story of her life had taken a turn, not with a man's decision, but with her own courage. In that moment, she understood the truth. When respect dies, love cannot survive. And Vivian chose to survive.